Okay, we're running? Okay. So, Far Cry, Yorardejo or Farhail for one game in the series. Well, two games in the series. Long story. Far Cry is what we're talking about today. And that is because the definite close friend of mine, Ronald Rob Mac McDonald, and a guy who I actually don't really know much about. Sorry, Mr. Noah Weil, if you ever see this. I know that they are making a Far Cry anthology show, and I decided to make a video rambling about it, as Far Cry is one of my longtime favorite video game series, and is one of the games that I think really would work well into a TV format, considering how different each game is from each other in a lot of cases. So that's what this video is going to be about. I have a ton of B-roll recorded this time, and I'm doing what I did with the Mass Effect video again before this, where I'm going to be talking over it instead of playing and then kind of splicing that together so it can sound a bit more cohesive instead of me like jumbling around and sounding stupid. So let's outline what I want to do this for this video. I'm going to be talking in this video as if I was like producer or like actor, like somebody very important on the team, and I'm right now sitting with them talking about how we want to adapt these games. I'm going to be going through the ones that I have mostly played, Far Cry 1 through 5. I'll be touching on some of the other stuff, like Blood Dragon Primal, New Dawn, and 6, but they're not the main focus, so if I do not get to them, that is to be expected slightly. But like I said, I want to touch on this and how I would want them adapt. Like, well, not adapt, how I would suggest them adapt, what I think would be good things to play to, and like also I'd like to film them, not like film them like use 50 millimeter IMAX cameras because it'll look cool when Christopher Nolan does action. So we're doing an action series, right? No, I mean like what kind of style I would want it to run for and kind of like tone and such, since the Far Cry series might be all stylistically different, but the basis of every game is the same. It's point and shoot. Now, the thing is with games, 5 different games has a big ability to really increase how guns handle and how they feel and how they shoot between the first game coming out in 2004 and even the last one in this video, Far Cry 5, coming out in what was like 2018. Oh my gosh. I think it was 2018. But even in that, you'll be able to, you can see Far Cry 5 shoots a bit better. I didn't have actual Far Cry 1 footage, unfortunately. For 1 and 2, we're using Far Cry 5 maps. But what I'm saying here is that considering that games had such a change in how guns work, that is something that is much more mechanically carried out when you play it. But as somebody watching it like as a show, there is a very good chance that just watching 5 seasons of people shooting up and down like that could potentially get boring. Not that it always does, but I'm just thinking like, how can you make it interesting every time that they are shooting? And how you can make each season feel unique as well. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be running through the games and how I think they would be adapted best, and what I am most nervous for considering they're adapted. So let's get right into it. Here we are on Far Cry 1. For Far Cry 1, it is semi-important to note that it was made by a different company, and it is a very different kind of game than the rest of the series. Far Cry 1 was made by Crytek, the people who made Crysis, for anybody that can remember the Can It Run Crysis meme. Now, that also includes some differences. Far Cry 1 was more of a graphics demo of a game, so that bled into what kind of happened with the story and some of the gameplay itself, as it was made much more to show off graphics. So what that means is the story isn't the strongest component of the game. That is something that leads to what I want to talk about for it specifically, because Far Cry 1 to me has always felt like kind of a big B-movie, Total Recall kind of vibe. Like Commando, you're like literally a special forces officer called Jack Carver. I mean, how much more like 80s to me? It feels like such 80s to me. You're stranded on an island, you get involved with this big conspiracy involving mad scientists, mercenary groups, the CIA agents that wear freaking crop tops, and you have a whole and shower in waterfalls in their swimming suits. Like I said, it's basically a dumb action movie that you play through Far Cry 1. And that is what I want most to be carried over if they're adapting it, you know? Play it like an action movie, honestly. Play like a big 80s action movie. Carver's like played by a big buff, like huge buff Arnold-looking guy, has all his dumb one-liners and such. Not dumb, one-liners are awesome. And all his lines and such, because that is something I think really does put Far Cry 1 apart from the rest of the series. You know, the rest of the series did kind of, it's not like, we're not talking like simulation like Arma or something, but the rest of the series definitely went for a much more grounded vibe, aesthetic, and story than Far Cry 1. I mean, even though they all have their fancy drug levels, I mean, none of them outright go to Far Cry 1's length of having actual just mutant monsters showing up partway through the story and becoming our main threat with the Trigens. Like I said, but that's also something you can have real fun with. You can kind of start out kind of like Predator. Played like Predator. You have your first half of the season played like a big '80s action movie. Jack Carver is our big special forces guy. He's just mowing down bad guys. They're flying everywhere. I mean, the AI in Far Cry 1 was already kind of busted, so it's not that far off that you can kind of make them like clown closets of bad guys to shoot out in the TV show as well. But then just like with Predator, you have the Trigens showing up, and suddenly it all becomes kind of this like action horror thing. So I think that would be a really fun way to adapt Far Cry 1 and really keep it interesting as you're going from a starting point. It also sets a tone that you really don't know what to expect for the rest of the series. So that being said, what I am the most nervous for in adapting any of these games, for most of them it follows the same thing, but for different kinds of reasons. But with Far Cry 1, it would be that it leans too much into the comedic aspect that Far Cry kind of became known for after mostly Blood Dragon and stuff in 4, and a lot of side mission content mostly in 5. Now, because in between that, Far Cry kind of became known for this. Really, it's to me interesting because I'll get into it with the games themselves, but Far Cry became known as this like kind of wacky, comedic-ish shooter when a lot of it really isn't. I mean, none of the campaigns are explicitly as funny as people would make it out to be. But with that being said, that is my biggest concern for Far Cry 1, that this kind of weird comedy vibe kind of ends up taking over the show, and it becomes, even though it's an '80s, let's say they run with the '80s vibe, it becomes kind of like '80s comedy thing, which can be fine. But I think to me, some of the charm about the original Far Cry was the fact that it was this kind of really stupid story, but it was played straight, just like all the best like so bad it's good narratives, and all the best so bad it's good movies or stories or stuff like that is usually built on this foundation of like it's actually kind of insane or stupid, but it's really taken serious by the characters in the story, so you can also kind of immerse yourself in how insane it is. And that also applies to Far Cry 1. Going from Far Cry 1 to Far Cry 2, it's insane. But to Jack Carver and them, it's all real threat, even more insane when you consider the potential implications of stuff in Far Cry 2 involving Carver himself. But to get with that, that is probably what I'm the most nervous for Far Cry 1. If they kind of just mess up the tone and it all becomes too comedic and lighthearted. So that will be that. Now, unfortunately, my B-roll is probably all going to be terribly timed, so I'll use whatever time I have here to kind of lay the ground for Far Cry 2. Hopefully I can get a bit of a scene set. So Far Cry 2 was the first game made by Ubisoft right after Far Cry 1, and they decided to go into a much different direction. I mean, like, drastically different. Far Cry 1, you were Jack Carver on this island, one-man army, blowing everything up. In Far Cry 2, you are a nameless mercenary stuck in the civil war in Africa, sent to kill a gun runner named the Jackal who's supplying both sides. You get bit with malaria. You get malaria in the first 5 minutes, like everybody in Africa does at some point. I mean, I'm from South Africa, and I'll tell you as a South African, at some point everybody has malaria. It's just a cultural thing, right? That's not true, okay? But no, you get malaria, you're just some random mercenary, and you're stuck in the middle of this horrendously freaking nightmarish war. Now, the thing with Far Cry 2 is it wants to be a much darker game. Now, kind of aesthetically it is. It's kind of washed out, 2008 color, all that good stuff. But its narrative wants to kind of skew into that darker edge as well that everybody and stories were taking in the 2000s, Casino Royale, the Bourne movies, Jack Bauer, our favorite pirate, and all that stories. Everything became much more serious and much more grounded in the real world. So, and Far Cry 2 wanted to go with that as well, but unfortunately the game itself didn't always support that very well, and that mostly came down to the way its narrative was conveyed, because it was shown with you walking into a room, two guys giving a briefing, you kill them and you go. So you don't really get that. Now, leading into that, I think this is where the adaptation can really shine. You can really lean into the moral dilemmas of being a mercenary in a war like this, and lean into some of that darker aspects the game hints at and stuff like the Jackal tapes. If you haven't, and you have played Far Cry 2, if you haven't listened to Jackal tapes, you probably have, but if you don't, and you want to get a sense of what I'm talking about when I talk about the tone of Far Cry 2, I'd highly recommend finding a video or something and listening to the tapes. They give a great explanation of who the Jackal is as a character, and also the kind of world that they were going for in Far Cry 2. Now, with that being said, that is what I would want them to expand on in Far Cry 2. I'd want it to kind of play up the, like I said, the grayness, the real unnervingness of being in a situation like this and what you'd have to do for that. And like once again, like I said, if season one was an '80s action movie, I'd want this to kind of look like, let's say, some like 24, like Casino Royale or something like that. You gotta have this not washed out vibe, but you get this real warm and humid feeling from it. Like I said, I'm from South Africa, and let me tell you, even not always just being in savannahs, just normal places can get hot, you know? And don't even get me started on people that are going to have to be spending days tracking and running up and down and getting into gunfights in the middle of the freaking savannah. That can get hot, you know? So I would want that to also be a thing with Far Cry 2, you know? You really lean into how difficult and unrelenting the nature aspect of it is, how difficult the work is, the kind of stuff the Jackal is as a person. As the Jackal is a villain that is still kind of different, even by these series standards as well, with Far Cry 1 being a borderline insane scientist, and Far Cry 2, no, Far Cry 3 onwards, leaning much more into the showmanship of the villains with stuff like Voss's famous speeches, Pagan Min's just over the top personality, the Seeds all as well, and Gus Fring. The Jackal does still stand apart as kind of really being just a guy, really isn't usually not that big showman guy. He shows up when he's needed in the narrative and he doesn't do much else. Like I said, a lot of the Jackal stuff is in those tapes, and I would want those tapes to be kind of like the basis of what I want a second season of the show to look like. Now, leading into what I would be most nervous about would probably be the same thing I said with Far Cry 1 for most of these, that they kind of get the tone wrong. But what I mean in this case is, let's say you want to lean into the moral grayness and the ethics of being a mercenary in a war like this, and you take one of the side objectives you get in the game. I might be wrong, okay? You take a side objective where you have to steal a king or prince's computer, and you meet one of your mercenary buddies at a gold mine, okay? And you want to kind of lean into that. You want to make an emphasis on what the gold mine does, because you stole this laptop, so you can use this gold mine to kind of blackmail the prince into doing whatever you need him to do for the other faction. But in doing that, you could potentially kill a bunch of refugees or hiding out where the prince is, you know, something like that. You do something like that as a choice, but then as a show, they can just brush over it. That would be my biggest concern, if that makes sense. If you want to lean into, like I said, the tone of Far Cry 2 and what it wants to do as a story and a world, being like an adaptation of Heart of Darkness, I glossed over that completely. I'm so sorry. But yeah, if you want to lean into that and you kind of just you lean into it, but really surface level, I think that could really ruin it as a season. Because, like I said, the best thing with Far Cry 2 can be if you really expand on what we're doing. So that really covers it to me mostly. Far Cry 2 is my favorite, so I can probably rant about it for hours on end, you know? I mean, just now, just like watching this, I can think about like all the stuff like, oh, and well, one thing I want them to get right. Just remember this. Afrikaans. I want them to be yelling stupid Afrikaans explicitives like in the game, because oh my gosh, there's not a single game that I've played with Afrikaans people or in Africa I feel that has captured the language and the absolute irrational anger over some small stuff that I have seen and remembered my grandma and people in Africa get like in that game. I mean, really, it's an experience for anybody that understands Afrikaans, because you just hear a bunch of random gibberish if you're like purely English. I've had some of my friends listen as well, but it's a great thing. That's something I want them to get right as well. You know, it's a series that spans the whole world, so get some of the fun language stuff in as well. You know, so that's that. The tone not being consistent and not leaning into how much fun you can have with languages is something I would really want. Is something I'm really nervous about that they can get wrong. So that covers Far Cry 2. Lean into the tone of Africa, the harshness of the world, the darkness or like the disturbing ethics of the choices your characters have to make, as they are all mercenaries. They're not heroes. They're not Jason Brody fighting to save his friends. They're not Jack Carver. There are no-name mercenaries all here to kill a guy and make money out of his death. Okay? Lean into that. And like I said, don't go lean into it and then just kind of make it a null choice, you know? So that's Far Cry 2 for me. Now moving on from that, we are going to go into Far Cry 3. The one that they're most likely probably going to start with. I mean, Far Cry 3 is the most famous one. It's the one that, even if Far Cry 1 and 2 was a success, Far Cry 3 is the game that put the series on the map. Voss, Insanity, Jason, all that stuff, it really catapulted the series. Now that being said, it would also be, I think, an interesting one to adapt as well. Even if you're going as a starter, it'd be an interesting one to adapt, because there's a lot of stuff, once again, I think you can do with that. So for if I'm going like we want to make Far Cry 1 an action movie, Far Cry 2 a much more gritty and realistic dark epic, no, not dark epic, dark story about Africa and wars in Africa and such. Far Cry 3, I would say, I think the best vibe to go with would be not exactly, I'll explain it right now, but found footage. Not in the sense of, since in the story, spoilers, if you haven't played Far Cry 3 by now, your brother dies in the start of the game, you know, not now you want to go found footage. Okay, there's three people here and one doesn't die and you're just randomly going to follow Jason around with a camera for the rest of the story. No, found footage in the sense of what you're watching, you feel like you shouldn't be watching. That's a very big thing that's always prevalent in found footage stuff. You know, you have this underlying feeling that whatever you're watching, you shouldn't be watching, like the VHS movies or like Blair Witch or such. You know, you're like you're watching this, but at the same time, you feel like I shouldn't be having access to this. This is some like classified or like dark web crap that everybody found in the early days of the internet, some kind of gore video or something. You know, that kind of uneasy feeling, I think, is something that should be all around Far Cry 3, even in its action. You know, like I said, Far Cry 1 is an action movie, is a big action movie. Far Cry 2 is darker, more surgical. Far Cry 3 action has to also kind of feel like I feel uneasy, you know, maybe like not Dutch angles per se, but a kind of Dutch feeling, like the I think the best vibe I can think of is like I said, found footage, you know. It's really raw. It's really once again also humid and sweaty environment. This is a tropical jungle. Okay? You're going to be sweating just like in Africa, and there's a good chance you're going to be sweating even more than in Africa and more profusely in a place like the Rook Islands. So lean into that. It feels hot, and your guns could not hell. What am I saying? An AK is not going to jam ever, and these guys all use it. But your guns are greasy. Your guns look wet. Everything is, you know. I'm trying to find a way to explain it and sound like I know what I'm saying, but I'm just blanking here. I'm sorry to anybody watching. But my idea is just like you get that grime, you get that sweat, that heat, that feeling that you're always being watched, like in the pirates being everywhere. You just nowhere feels safe. Whatever you're watching, and the whole show should feel like you're not supposed to be watching it. And I think that perfectly would encapsulate the feeling of Far Cry through this like constant downward spiral into insanity. Voss's decline, Jason's decline, as that is once again spoilers, a big part of the narrative is Jason having to fight up against this human smuggling ring to save his friends, and how that ends up mentally affecting him. How he becomes numb to the killing, and how it just becomes daily fare to him, and how he just ends up reveling in it compared to at the start. And now something that as well you can really lean into in a TV show because as I said earlier, with this being a game, gameplay being set in stone, for the narrative, Jason has never shot a gun. I don't remember if he does say that, but let's say, like for this example, he has never shot a gun. Last gun he shot was a BB gun with his friends, and he's never thrown knives. But for the sake of the game to be enjoyable, Jason has to be able to pick up a gun and immediately shoot it completely accurately. With a show, we can lean into that once again. We can give Jason some time where he learns how to shoot, or like learns to shoot more properly, learns, let's say, like makeshift reload techniques to make things go faster, you know? And if you feel like that's something you can put in an episode, maybe make it like a credits thing, you know? Like every episode's credits is Jason learning something. That can also kind of add to the Tau progression of the game itself. You know, also have this feeling of Jason growing as you're watching. At the end, you see something he's learned or he's learning. So that's what I think. And Voss as well. A big thing with Voss that I think they need to keep as something that is not in the game, but it's something that is detrimental, I think, because of the game. Voss, as anybody that has played Far Cry 3, Voss is the most famous villain of it. But for those of you who know, Voss is only in half of the game. And that is perfect because Voss is this kind of midway point ending that completely mirrors where Jason is going now, that you unlock a second island with all the skills you have now unlocked, stronger weapons, and even more complex outposts and such to take out, so you can just go absolutely wild, revel in all your new skills, and go kill people and enjoy it just like Voss did. That's the purpose of Voss dying. That's the way I've always read it. You know, you kill Voss, and for that kind of next act of the game, you kind of become like the next Voss, and like the sense of, like I said, how murder becomes this really addictive thing to chase as well. I think that should stay exactly like that is. Now, the reason I say that is, it seems like common practice though, but the thing is, with Voss becoming so popular and them leaning into that, there's a good chance that, let's say, Ubisoft is heavily involved in this. They might not want them to kill off Voss at the point in the story that he is, because Voss is going to be an attention seeker. I mean, that's the reason he got a DLC in Far Cry 6, right? Voss is kind of the face of Far Cry. So make a TV show, we get the big famous red shirt Mohawk guy in. Why would we want to kill him off halfway through the season and then replace him with a South African guy that kind of sounds like Leonardo DiCaprio did in Blood Diamond, you know? So that's what I mean. You know, if Ubisoft and them are really involved, it's also just Ubisoft fair to be stupid. Okay, they might not want Voss to be killed. They want him to live out and just kind of becomes like recurring villain throughout the season. That's one of the things I want them to keep. I want Voss to die, and that's the thing. That's both the thing I want them to keep, and the thing I'm most nervous about Far Cry 3. That Voss doesn't die, or that Voss is there, but he becomes just like almost super important figure when, even though he is in the game, he's also not. He's a bad guy. He isn't like the devil on Jason's shoulder the entire story, because Jason kills and takes that role himself. I'm sounding very pretentious now. I'm terribly sorry to anybody listening. I sound like a pretentious snob. But that kind of sums it up for Far Cry 3. It has to feel unnerving. You have to feel like what you're watching you shouldn't be watching. Voss has to still be there, still die off. And I think the rest of the story, honestly, I don't think there's much that needs to be changed, you know? Maybe just potentially they want to go with the ending where you stay on the island and get killed, but I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So I don't think there's much that I think really needs to be changed, you know, in terms of narrative and that. I'm keeping this narrative light because I don't want to get into big spoiler stuff, because there's a chance that people see this and they go play the games for themselves. So I don't want to spoil anything as well. I don't know what they're trying to do with the show anyway. So I'm just going into like broad stroke stuff. I said this Far Cry 3 into the video. But once again, let's go on to Far Cry 4, and my B-roll is terrible. I'm now only halfway through this part of Far Cry 3. But we're going to move on anyway. Far Cry 4, after Far Cry 3, and as far as the story goes, it's not really that different, in the sense of that it's also, once again, fish out of water, fight against a charismatic bad guy, you help some plucky resistance, and take back the country. With Far Cry 4, though, the big change is the fact that that this whole arc of Jason, of like your character becoming more of a killer, is kind of just dropped, and we're back with, well, we'll say like action movie logic of AJ spends a whole cutscene going, but I'm not part of the resistance. I'm just here to spread my mom's ashes. And then Sabal and them go, no, AJ, you are the son of Mohan Gale. That means you have to fight with us. And then he just goes, fine, I'll join your resistance. And then he becomes the most professional killer to ever professional kill ever of all time. So yeah, it doesn't pay as near as much attention as Far Cry 3, and that's fine, because I mean, Far Cry 4 story doesn't have to be like that. Not every game has to be as serious as Far Cry 3. So for Far Cry 4, though, what I'd wanted to lean into and what I kind of wanted to take with it being adaptation would be the fact that the game is set in India. Now, what I mean by that is I'd say have some fun, you know. You can also make this a bit of a fun season. If they're going to adapt it, and even closely to the way that's being suggested here, you're going to have 2 seasons of very, very serious and very dour and dark TV with Far Cry 2 and 3. Obviously, if that's adapted well, it'd still be highly entertaining. Some of the best shows ever are incredibly depressing. But with Far Cry 4, you have this unique chance of being like another season that can completely pivot without completely ruining the show, but also being able to be a bit of a palate cleanser in terms of tone. As once again, Far Cry 4 is in India. We operate more on action movie logic, and I think that's a way you can kind of play it out. Maybe lean into some kind of Bollywood over-the-top action scenes. Heaven knows there's enough stuff in this game alone to really constitute the over-the-top Bollywood stuff. I mean, there's takedowns, jumping out of planes, the cars, then taking it over. There's an actual cutscene where you jump off a quad bike into a plane, grab a guy out of the door. I think he stays in the plane. He steals a document, chucks a grenade in that flies by some miracle shot, flies into the plane and blows the plane up. There's enough stuff in Far Cry 4 to fit that idea, in my opinion, of really kind of hamming it up a bit again after these 2 seasons, you know, kind of leaning into the semi-Bollywood feeling, you know, AJ, not make AJ a big Bollywood action hero, but, you know, you kind of just have some fun with it again. I mean, because you can also do that with Pagan Min. Once again, Pagan is a much more personable antagonist in the Jackal, Voss, or Hoyt. You can really let him also go loose. I mean, I can just imagine if they're doing that. Oh my gosh! Like as like a small time actor, like the idea to play someone like Pagan is so much fun because you can just kind of like have so much fun with how crazy he is. Like you can also have some fun with Pagan again. You can have an antagonist that isn't this really messed up mirror about stuff, and same with AJ. You can also give AJ a bit more personality, similarly to what I didn't say in Far Cry 2, as AJ does talk in the game, but it's not nearly as fleshed out as anything in Far Cry 3. You can kind of give him a bit more of oomph. It's just that's just what I think. I could be wrong, but that's my thoughts on that. You can really lean into that, and also something I would want them to lean into. This isn't like with the other stuff like my wish list. Something I would want them to lean into is the golden path and some of the morals leading into that. Now, like I said, this could be a bit of a lighter season, but that doesn't mean it's suddenly just an upbeat action show. There are still some fun stuff to deal with plot wise in that, like with Amita and Sabal, the two potential leaders of the golden path. How they do that is I don't know. Maybe they're not gonna have like choices be part of the narrative. Maybe it's just one person going after Pagan. Maybe like Amida and Sabal kind of become this like one like not like homogenized character. I guess that's the word. Like their character traits get mixed into one, or maybe they just go like full secret ending and AJ says screw it halfway through the season and it becomes him working with Pagan. That'd be freaking ballsy. I'd be like so ballsy of a choice. But yeah, that would be it. And once again, my biggest concern would once again be the comedy aspect of it because, like I said, Far Cry 4 in general is a bit more of a lighthearted game, and they did lean into the comedy more. But once again, the comedy, like with all stuff, wasn't what defined the game. It was some fun flavor added into it, and as with it all, I am nervous that that kind of like semi oddballish comedy that the Far Cry series has become known for is something they take too far, and it kind of ends up ruining the fun that this can also have in a bit more of a serious context. I don't know. I hope this sounds logical to people listening. I've been practicing this for almost 3 weeks now, so I'm really hoping this sounds good. But that kind of sums up for Far Cry 4, though. That is my thoughts on that. That's my thoughts on that. I hope they lean into that. I hope they lean into Pagan a bit more. Like I said, give him some more time with AJ, flesh out his character a bit more. You do have more time to give him some backstory and his stuff with like Mohan and Ishwari, I think her name was. So yeah, there's a lot of like more detailed stuff you can personally go into. I can literally make a video on every game itself, but I'm not. I'm just going through some broad strokes because I know some people say I have a fun voice to listen to, so I don't want to just focus on one thing. And I really like talking. If this length isn't evident by that, and I'm a terrible rambler, I'm sorry. So I still have some B-roll here going before we get to Far Cry 5 proper. So I think this would be a good time to briefly discuss some of the semi-spin-offs and DLC-ish areas of the series in one go. So the first one would be Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. If they're doing this anthology, I mean, Blood Dragon is completely up for grabs, you know, because going by the normal series, Blood Dragon is completely on its own. But if this is all anthology, it means everything stands on its own already, so you can kind of get away with a actually even more 80s thing, you know? I don't know how I would want that to be changed, though. Maybe for the sake of it being Blood Dragon and it's already different enough as is, you kind of make it an animated thing, you know? Sorry, big firework. You kind of make it a bit of an animated thing, maybe, instead of just like a live action thing, really separate it. Like I said, I haven't played Blood Dragon in even longer, so it's much more foggy in my head. I'm sorry about the fireworks. I don't know what's going on. I'm in Panama, and anybody that lives here in Gorgona or knows about it, the fireworks just go off randomly. I really don't know why. But that kind of sums up Blood Dragon. Not really much I can say. I think it's a fun little kind of inside thing. It's not much of a story-heavy thing. The story's already kind of a joke in and of itself. And, like, there's not really much I think you can possibly screw up adapting it. And, like, I mean, how do you screw up, honestly? Like, how would you possibly screw up laser shooting dragons, super fast cyborgs with ninja, with laser shurikens on his arms, and a triple-barreled 1887 shotgun? Like, honestly, how do you mess that up? It's impossible. So after that, we have Far Cry Primal. Honestly, I actually have even less experience with Primal. It's somehow just never interested me. But as an adaptation, if you're going once again anthology, I do think there's some fun you can do, especially considering like, let's say this is going, every game that has been mentioned has been done as a show through release order. That means we would have season 1, season 2, season 3 Blood Dragon, and season 4. All of those 5 seasons then have all been, like I said, filled with action, with guns, maybe knives and explosives. And even if like my ideas are followed and they give the guns and all that different ways and different ways it's shot and shot and done and feels and like different time periods like I'm talking about now, Primal could still be an interesting take because it's completely away from guns. You have a chance to make a show with freaking caveman combat. I mean, obviously the age rating on that is going to be insane, but that could also be a fun spinoff. That is about my extent with that. I really don't know much about the story except that Adam Jensen is the bad guy. Not the bad guy, or is he the good guy? Like I said, I really don't know anything about Primal. I just know Adam Jensen's in there, and I think he didn't ask for it, as always. After that, we have New Dawn. I'm bringing it up now because I still have a ton of this, and I'm not going to finish this video talking on Far Cry 5 gameplay. But after that, we have New Dawn coming in after Far Cry 5. And, I mean, it's both a sequel and kind of its own thing as well, so it would be more applicable to kind of adapt it after Far Cry 5. But still, in and of itself, if you want to run it as an anthology on its own, you can do it. And like once again, that's the nice thing with an anthology. You're really not bound to the semi-narrative constraints of the series being all set in the real world. You can just New Dawn can even be its own thing if they want. So that's really honestly all I know. I'd probably say give the villains more threatening like anything. Really, those two are even less intimidating than the Calypso twins, and that's a hell of a downgrade in my opinion. So that literally covers my knowledge with the rest of the series. And now finally we get to talk about Far Cry 5, where we're still like almost 7 minutes of Far Cry 4 gameplay left. Oh, stupid stuff, stupid autism talking. Yay. Far Cry 5 though is a very interesting one to talk about because in terms of, I think its narrative alone, Far Cry 5 is facing the biggest challenge out of all of them. As even though like Far Cry 3, 1, 2, and 4 have all dealt with some pretty heavy topics, the fact that Far Cry 5 focuses on a main antagonistic faction that is all based in religion is going to make it a bit of a nightmare anyway. I remember when the game was releasing, it was already catching controversy, and now if you're going to have a TV show where there's obviously more time to develop them, develop the seeds, and develop their kind of really twisted philosophy and the way they twist the Bible themselves, you're going to have another field day with the presses and everybody going on about how disgusting this is. But I mean, that also, as a Christian myself, I think that could also be good because it can also be a great story on how people take something like the Bible and absolutely just twist it to serve their own purpose. A phrase my mom told me about called darting. Bible darting really springs to mind whenever I think of like the Seed family. It can really make a good story about how people twist stuff like that. Now, people lead people like a flock. You know, they become sheep because they just listen and listen and listen to all this really false information. I think that is something that Far Cry 5's story has a unique possibility to run into. Now, as I've talked with all of these sections so far, like camera-ish work, like action-wise, I'd say we can, given the deputy as a character is already about as non-existent, he's just less charismatic than the mercenary from Far Cry 2, because at least we had the notable trait of having malaria and some fun personality with animations. But I mean, the deputy, in all my time of playing Far Cry 5, I really haven't seen the deputy ever interact with like anything like personality-ish wise. So really, once again, like as a small-time actor or just an actor in general, I think the deputy would be like a field day for somebody to get, because you can really basically make your own character completely up for the deputy, you know? But that aside, though, the deputy is a marshal, so marshals and officers have body cams. I think, as with Far Cry 3, once again, we're going to that kind of vibe. I'd say like you can kind of film it and get the feeling like a body cam-ish footage, you know? As this is all a police raid, supposed to be a police arrest of, was it Joseph Seed was his main name? I always mix up Joseph and Jacob. I think Joseph is the main one. I'm replaying it right now and I can't remember the names. I'm so sorry, everybody. It is Joseph, yes. The game and the season probably start with the attempted arrest of Joseph Seed, and that all goes haywire. So there's naturally body cams would probably be on, and you can just run with that. Now, once again, depending on how they want to adapt some plot points of it, because as with I said with Far Cry 4, the game also it got a bit lighter, and that also included much more action in certain areas. So I don't know how difficult filming certain action scenes would be like with a body cam. Once again, so I'm just talking more like the idea of a body cam, like what I said with Far Cry 3, the kind of feeling like found footage and this really unnerving feeling going all around. I think that's something you can do for Far Cry 5. You know, try to get that body cam feeling. You're right in there with the deputy and what's happening. Maybe they even do like a couple completely first person POV shots or something like that. And that's it. You know, I'd say for the biggest thing, like I'm also like another thing I'd also really want to find out would be how you do the story of Far Cry 5, as out of the entire series, Far Cry 5 has the most open-ended narrative to my knowledge. I think Far Cry 6 also kind of is, but I mean Far Cry 6's story is such a mess anyway in some cases. Far Cry 5's though is split up into the territories, obviously, where you can, after doing your tutorial, you're very strongly nudged to go into the territory of John Seed, I think it was, and then the Yes guy, the friggin' Yes Wattpad guy, whatever. I can't remember names now. I'm terribly sorry, everybody, but you're strongly encouraged to go into the Yes Wattpad guy's area and go kill him. Now, the thing is with a show, you could also do that, but in the game, you can also randomly go into Faith Seed's area or the Army Vets guy area and go continue their stories. Now, it's not like every area is about a multi-hour God of War Ragnarok epic in storytelling, but they do spend a lot of time on the characters now they're done. Now, once again, the thing I'm bringing this up is because this is a TV show, and modern-day seasons don't run that long. So if we're looking at maybe like a 10-episode season, that means we have 4 full antagonists to fit in, and the potential of side characters also needing to be fleshed out, like Pastor Elijah and Nick Rye, and maybe Herc also shows up here, like in the other games. So there's a lot, especially in Far Cry 5. We're finally in Far Cry 5. Yay! So especially in Far Cry 5, in terms of what happens. Sorry, I just saw the person die. In terms of what happens to the story and the characters there is a lot to fill in. So I don't know how they're gonna do Far Cry 5. Maybe they make it like 2 seasons instead. How I would do it though is I would make the siblings overlap in terms of storytelling. Let's say the the town you liberate at the end of Wattpad Tumblr's area. You liberate Falls End, there it is. You liberate Falls End at the start, and you find out that in that same episode, Faith Seed was also stealing people from Falls End to become test subjects for Bliss and such, and you kind of overlap the stories as you go on through it. I think that would be the most ideal way, because once again, I don't know what we're looking at episode-wise and how they're going to be doing it. I don't even know, like, if they want to even, like, risk Far Cry 5, considering, like I said, once again, it's going to be a very difficult season to adapt theme-wise, at least, or to get public interested in. I'm not interested. I ran into this earlier. I'm not doing this again. Yeah, it has some not heavy and very topical subjects. So, yeah, Far Cry 5 would be an interesting one. I am very interested to see how they would do that. The deputy, the seeds, and once again, how they do that. I keep saying that. How they would incorporate them and overlap them. I gave my idea. Like I said, I want this to be kind of like a police body cam feeling. And they overlap, the sibling stories overlap with each other. That way you kind of give them all a bit of screen time as well. You can also kind of overlap their origin stories with each other as well. Instead of maybe you do have time to dedicate an episode to each sibling themselves. Maybe you don't. If you don't, I think this is the best way to go. You get some overlap in the story. I think that is your best bet. If you don't, you do actually have time to give them all the depth. That would be great. Now, once again, the thing I'm most nervous for would be the comedy overtaking it, especially in Far Cry 5, where they really did lean into the zaniness more with stuff like the Testicle Festival and other really great wacky side missions. Now, once again, the side missions, not the main campaign, but it's a symptom of it because those side missions become some of the stuff that people talk about the most. At least the people I've talked about Far Cry and a lot of things I've seen, people usually talk about the insane antics of the world or the weird characters you might meet. So especially for a game that is going to be a split game, not a game, a season of TV that'll be talking about religion and the all the kind of baggage that comes with that. If you're going to be bringing stuff like the Testicle Festival, you have a very strong chance of causing potential severe whiplash. Because once again, we're going from the tone of potentially Far Cry 4, if they're going like that, like a Bollywood action tone, to a incredibly really serious story about brainwashing, cults, and people fighting for their survival. Yeah, and it also depends on like what ending they go with. As Far Cry 5 as my least favorite ending in the series, as the most dour. So I would really hope they change that because I really hate the ending of Far Cry 5. I'm not going into that because it's another 35-minute rant, and anybody that's been watching this video for so long has listened to me talk for this long. So I'm terribly sorry about that as well. So I'm not going to waste your time even more. So yeah, that's Far Cry 5. You try and fit everything in. It's just gonna be a difficult season compared to all the other games due to the way the game is built themselves. Due to the way the game itself is built, it's gonna be a difficult season no matter how good you're taking it. And finally, for Far Cry 6, I don't have too much experience with it. I know the story was a bit of a mess. I think Far Cry 6 is the simplest thing that I would want it to run with. Would probably be focusing a bit more once again. I think you can kind of go back to what I said with Far Cry 2 for the story of Far Cry 3. You kind of focus on the kind of shady ethics of La Gurias and how the war they're fighting against Castillo, how that would work and the kind of choices they have to make. Because unfortunately, even though it is fun to wage a big rebel offensive in the Far Cry series, staging a giant countrywide coup and rebellion like that does sometimes necessitate choices and actions that aren't very heroic. So I think that's something they could lean into in Far Cry 6. Really give the characters and the stakes a bit of more clarity, and also if they don't get Giancarlo Esposito back, está bien. Por supuesto está bien, porque no, I'm going Spanish now. It's fine if they don't get Giancarlo back because he also has stuff to do, and if he wants to come back, it's also fine. They might just not do it. I don't know. It's a difficult one to talk about. But with that being said, he might not want to come back, and that's fine. You might want to come back. The reason I keep running this over is because I had a good point and I forgot that. Sorry, I wasted everybody's time there for a couple seconds. But my final standing point for Far Cry 6 is most nervous, of course, would be that they really just mess it up. They get Castillo back. Let's say Giancarlo does come back and they ruin Castillo again. They make him the sickly old guy sitting in a corner and dying. I think the best way for Castillo to work as a villain would be kind of like a Handsome Jackish like archetype. He's constantly a point of contention. He's constantly attacking throughout the story. He's not just like physically attacking or like killing rebels. He's also constantly turning the entire country against him. This is supposed to be a country that has been run into the ground by this dictatorship. A lot of these people don't always have the guts to fight back. So he makes it more difficult for them like that. That could be something fun they do. Like I might be wrong. I might be sounding really stupid. Like I said, I don't know too much about Far Cry 6. My experience really extends from 1 to 5. But with that being said, that is everything I have to say. It was a very long video to plan out and kind of write out notes, and even then I kind of stumbled over myself a lot. But I really wanted to make it because Far Cry is a big series to me. It's something I've always enjoyed playing. It's something Far Cry 2 especially is a very sentimental game to me. So the idea that these games are now getting a really cool big budget adaptation is awesome, and I just want them to do as good as they can. I don't know if Rob Mack or any of them are ever going to see this video or anything, but if they do, you guys have like a really potentially awesome game, potentially awesome series here. I don't want you guys to mess it up, or like even if Ubisoft gets involved and does Ubisoft stuff, I don't want them to really screw it up. So that's this video. If you have made it till here, thank you so much for watching and putting up with my terrible thought process and terrible ability to remember my own notes and stumbling over myself. Yeah, that's it. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have seen if you are watching this, what do you think about the idea of a Far Cry series? What do you think they're gonna do? Let's keep it fun. Who do you think they'll cast for some of this stuff? Because this is a great show also Once again, I brought up a couple of times, speaking from somebody that's done acting and then like one or a few things and wants to do it a bit more professionally. A show like this is a great way for them to also really give some new talent chance to be found. You know, you have like especially people like the rookie, not the rookie, people like the deputy or the rook. Oh yeah, the other call him rook. People like the deputy rook and the mercenaries could be great for some up and coming actors because, like I said, there is almost no personality to them in the game, so you can really flex what you have for if they're going in certain directions with the story. Someone like Jason, just in general, would be a great role to get. I mean, it's something I would freaking love to do. You get to do action, get to be dramatic, you get to have kind of dumb one-liners. It's like the perfect thing. So yeah, the way I'm looking at it is I see it's a to me, like I said, it's an important series. So I might also be kind of rose tinted glasses looking at this as a TV show adaptation as well, you know. But yeah, it's just a big series to me. And I think there is a lot of potential here to really make something fun. I think video games in general are just a great potential mine to go through. There's like a bunch of stuff I would love to adapt. Like I could make a bunch of videos as well. Infamous, like Killzone Resistance, some of those games. Gravity Rush I know is getting a movie. I wonder what that's gonna be like. I know like my brother and I we love these stuff. We spent a whole night, if anybody ever wants to say, we made a whole idea of our like own pitch of Gravity Rush 3. So with that being said though, that's all I wanted to say. This is something I'm interested in. I hope you enjoyed the video. I really do. So very long amount of talking for an exceedingly long amount of time. My throat it feels more drier than the Kalahari because I haven't drank a glass of water in like almost 5, 10 plus takes on this thing, which sounds stupid, but I mean I talk so much between this, and there's also me rehearsing everything in between every freaking take. So yeah, I'm gonna end it here. Thank you incredibly much for watching. Anybody that did, I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, if you do in any way, share it around. Maybe this gets some traction. Maybe get some. Maybe some of these. Maybe somebody sees that they like some of these ideas, and we can get some really cool stuff for a Far Cry show. Because I mean, it's still a series that people love. You know. That being said, I really enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. Have a awesome whatever time of day you are in whatever country you are. I know, like buenos dias, goedemiddag, and good night, or something like that. Ciao.